welcome. Settle yourself into a comfortable position. Allow your body to rest, and let your breathing slow into a steady rhythm. Tonight, we will take a long, gentle walk through the past. A past that was often weary, often uncomfortable, but filled with rhythms and textures that, from our vantage point today, can seem both distant and strangely familiar. Our journey will take us to 18th century France, just before the revolution would change everything. It was a world of contrasts. On the one hand, glittering palaces, intricate etiquette, and the music of Mozart drifting through candlelit halls. On the other, endless fields, rough wooden huts, and backbreaking labor performed by millions of peasants, who formed the backbone of the kingdom. In this video, you will experience 4 perspectives of this world. We will begin with the harsh daily life of a French peasant, imagining yourself among the fields and villages of the time. We will then follow the story of one of history's most famous figures of the era. After that, we will explore a mystery that captured imaginations and whispers even today. And finally, we will step into the rarefied atmosphere of Versailles, the palace of kings, where life contrasted sharply with that of the peasantry. So, close your eyes if you wish, breathe slowly, and let us begin with the simple, often difficult rhythm of peasant life in 18th century France. Imagine yourself waking in a small, dimly lit cottage. The floor beneath you is made of packed earth, uneven beneath your straw-filled mattress. The air is heavy with the scent of wood smoke, not because of warmth, but because the chimney struggles to draw properly. In winter, frost often lingers on the inside of the walls. In summer, the room is close and damp, with insects slipping in through gaps in the wood. Your day begins early, before the sun has fully risen. Roosters call, and the faint sound of a neighbor's cart rattles along the village road. There is little privacy in a house like this, perhaps one room for your family, a fire for cooking, a few stools, and a rough table. The children stir, rubbing their eyes, already accustomed to days of long chores. The rhythm of peasant life is defined by the land. You step outside into the morning mist, fields stretching out beyond the village. The soil is heavy, clumped with last night's dew. You bend your back to tend it with simple tools, an iron-tipped plow pulled by oxen, or perhaps by your own hands if you cannot afford the animals. The work is monotonous but endless, sowing, weeding, harvesting, repeating. Each season dictating the pattern of your existence. Taxes loom over everything. As a peasant, you owe dues to your seigneur, the local noble who claims rights over the land you work. Grain chickens or even labor itself may be demanded. Then comes the tithe to the church, perhaps 1/10 of your harvest. Collected in barns that seem endlessly full compared to your own meager store. Finally, there are the king's taxes, levied to support wars or the grandeur of Versailles. Often it feels as though your work feeds everyone but yourself. Hunger is a constant companion. Bread is the staple, and the price of grain is always on your mind. A bad harvest means thin loaves, sometimes stretched with chestnut flour or ground acorns. The memory of famine lingers in the village when bellies ached, and many did not survive the winter. You are careful with every crumb. The rhythm of your day is punctuated by small moments. Pause at midday, perhaps a hunk of coarse bread dipped in thin soup. The chatter of neighbors at the communal oven, where families bring their dough to be baked. Children chase one another down narrow lanes, their laughter carrying across the fields. These are the sounds that stitch life together, even when survival feels precarious. Your clothing is simple: coarse wool or linen, patched and repatched. Shoes are precious, sometimes reserved only for Sundays. On feast days, the church bells call the village together, offering a rare chance for rest, celebration, or a dance on the green. But even these moments are shadowed by duty, the knowledge that tomorrow the work resumes. Imagine, as the sun sets, the fields growing quiet. The smell of smoke thickens as fires are lit for the evening meal. You sit at the rough wooden table once again, the same bread, the same thin stew, perhaps a little cheese, if fortune smiles. The day ends as it began, in the dim light of a single candle, your body heavy with fatigue. This was the life of millions in 18th century France. The rhythm of labor, the shadow of hunger, the weight of taxes. A world where survival was never guaranteed. and where the grand affairs of kings and nobles felt distant, yet ever pressing upon your shoulders. And yet, despite these struggles, life carried on. Seasons turned, children were born, songs were sung at harvest festivals, and stories were shared beside the fire. The peasant's world was weary, but it was also deeply human. Now, as we leave behind the furrows and cottages of rural France, let us turn our gaze toward a figure whose name is forever linked to this age. A queen whose fate became a symbol of the tensions that defined her time. From the quiet rhythm of the fields, let us drift now to a very different world, a place of chandeliers, polished marble floors, and endless ceremony. To understand the full contrast of 18th century France, we turn to one of its most famous figures, Mary Antoinette. She was born in Vienna in 1755, the 15th child of Empress Maria Theresa of Austria. As a young girl, she lived among music and tutors, her childhood filled with expectations that she would one day serve her family's political interests through marriage. At the age of just 14, she was sent to France to marry the young Louis, the Dauphin, who would later become Louis XVI. Imagine the journey, leaving behind her homeland, her language, and her family, crossing the Rhine into a new country where every word, every gesture, every glance would be scrutinized. Even her clothing was changed at the border. Austrian garments exchanged for French ones, as though she herself were being remade for her new role. Life at Versailles was unlike anything she had ever known. The palace was not only a home, but a theater, where daily rituals unfolded like a play. From the moment she awoke, her life was public. Courtiers gathered in her bedchamber to watch as her ladies-in-waiting dressed her. Each item of clothing presented and passed through layers of rank. Before it could reach her hands, privacy, as we think of it today, scarcely existed. The days were filled with ceremony. Meals were grand, eaten under the gaze of nobles and attendants. Walks in the gardens were formal affairs, conducted under the watchful eyes of hundreds. The palace sparkled with gilded mirrors and painted ceilings, but beneath the surface, politics simmered. Each smile, each friendship, each patronage decision carried weight. Marie Antoinette was often lonely in this glittering world. Her marriage at first was slow to produce children, and gossip filled the halls. She sought relief in music and theater, in a small circle of trusted companions. At times she escaped the suffocating etiquette of Versailles by retreating to the Petit Trianon, a smaller estate on the palace grounds. There, she tried to create a simpler life, with gardens, dairy cottages, and plays performed with friends. To her, it was a refuge. To her critics, it seemed frivolous, a queen playing at being a shepherdess while the people starved. The image of Marie Antoinette became a symbol, both adored and despised. Pamphlets accused her of extravagance, calling her Madame and blaming her for France's financial troubles. Rumors circulated endlessly stories of jewels, masked balls, and scandalous affairs, most of which were exaggerated or invented. Yet in a country where bread was often scarce, even the illusion of luxury fed resentment. And yet she was not simply a caricature. Private letters, she wrote tenderly to her children and worried over their future. She supported charitable causes, donating to hospitals and orphanages, though these gestures rarely received attention compared to her spending on fashion. As the revolution approached, her life changed dramatically. The court's rituals, once symbols of grandeur, became targets of anger. Crowds gathered outside the palace, demanding bread and reforms. When the royal family was forced to leave Versailles and move to Paris, the spell of royal majesty was broken. Marie Antoinette's final years were marked by imprisonment, fear, and ultimately, her trial and execution. Yet even at the end, she remained a figure of fascination, admired by some for her composure, condemned by others as a symbol of privilege, though her life. We see the sharp divide between the ordinary struggles of the peasantry and the glittering but fragile world of the elite. Her story is not just one of a queen, but of a society where contrasts had become unbearable. And with her life in mind, we now turn from biography to mystery. For 18th century France was not only a land of politics and labor, but also of intrigue, whispers, and scandals that rippled across the kingdom. One such mystery, the affair of the diamond. Necklace shook the reputation of the queen and deepened the gulf between ruler and ruled. From the solemn dignity of Marie Antoinette's biography, let us drift deeper into a tale that feels half like a fable, half like a cautionary whisper. This is the story of a necklace glittering with diamonds, heavy with cost, wrapped in deceit that helped to darken the queen's reputation. The affair of the diamond necklace unfolded in the 1780s. When France's financial troubles were mounting and the people were already restless, it began with a creation. Two of Paris's most skilled jewelers, desperate to display their craft, designed an extravagant necklace unlike any other. It shimmered with hundreds of diamonds, dazzling and ostentatious. The price was staggering so high that even kings hesitated. The jewelers first offered the necklace to Louis XV, who imagined giving it to his mistress, Madame du Barry. But before the transaction could be made, the king died. The necklace remained unsold, its glittering stones a burden rather than a treasure, for who could possibly afford it? Now imagine yourself in the bustling streets of Paris at this time. Word of the necklace spread like gossip in a marketplace. The jewelers needed a buyer, but the necklace had become infamous, too grand, too costly, too tainted by royal scandal. And yet in this climate of whispers and ambitions, a scheme began to form. At the center of the plot was a woman named Jeanne de la Motte, who claimed descent from a noble family, though her life was far from noble. She saw in the necklace a chance to elevate herself. With cunning, she convinced Cardinal de Rohan, a high-ranking clergyman, that he could win the queen's favor by secretly arranging for her to acquire the jewel. The cardinal longed for reconciliation with Marie Antoinette. He had fallen out of her good graces and believed that helping her obtain such a treasure would restore his standing at court. Jeanne, playing on his hopes, assured him that the queen desired the necklace, but wished to avoid public scandal by keeping the purchase discreet. A web of deception was spun. Forged letters, written as if from the queen herself, were delivered to the cardinal. At night, in the gardens of Versailles, a woman resembling Marie Antoinette, an actress disguised to perfection, met the cardinal briefly, sealing his belief in the scheme. Convinced he was serving the queen, the cardinal arranged the purchase. The necklace was handed over, but rather than reaching royal hands, it vanished into the possession of the conspirators. The fraud unraveled soon after, and the scandal burst into the open. The irony was sharp. Marie Antoinette had never sought the necklace, had never even desired it. Yet in the public imagination, the story was irresistible. A queen, already rumored to be extravagant, now seemed caught in a web of jewels, deceit, and wasteful desire. And gossip magnified the tale, and even though she was innocent, the damage to her reputation was immense. For the people of France, hungry for bread, the story was more than scandal. It was proof, or so it seemed, of royal indulgence at their expense. Truth mattered less than perception. The queen, already called Madame, became even more firmly associated with excess and detachment from the struggles of ordinary life. The affair of the diamond necklace lingers in history, not just as a tale of fraud, but as a symbol. It showed how fragile the image of monarchy had become. A glittering piece of jewelry could, in its way, help topple a throne. As the echoes of this scandal fade, let us move gently now from mystery to contrast. For while peasants bent their backs in fields and scandals shook the palace, another world continued to unfold inside Versailles. A world of ceremony, etiquette, and glittering ritual, where life moved according to rhythms as strict as any farm. Though gilded with gold and softened by silk, from the quiet cottages of peasants and the scandals of jewels, we arrive now at the Palace of Versailles. Here, life moved according to a rhythm no less demanding, though wrapped in velvet gilt and ceremony. Imagine approaching the palace from a distance. A long straight road lined with trees leads toward a vast facade of stone. Its windows glittering with sunlight, its roofline adorned with statues. Fountains play in the gardens, their steady rhythm contrasting with the stillness of reflecting pools. Versailles was designed to overwhelm, to remind every visitor of the grandeur of the French monarchy. Inside, life at court was structured like a theater. Every gesture had meaning, every moment unfolded in ritual. The day began with the king's rising, known as the lever. Courtiers crowded into the royal bedchamber to witness what we might consider the most private of moments. Ministers, noblemen, and attendants each played their part in presenting clothing, in offering a basin of water, or in fastening a button. To assist the king was an honor granted by rank, carefully observed. Marie Antoinette had her own version of these ceremonies. Her mornings unfolded in a sequence of bows, curtsies, and offerings of garments, each step laden with tradition. To dress a queen was not simply a task, it was a privilege that reinforced the layers of hierarchy. Meals were likewise ceremonies. At the Grand Kavir, the royal family dined while courtiers observed. Silver platters and porcelain dishes were carried in procession, and even the act of serving water followed strict order. To us, it may seem intrusive, even exhausting. To those at Versailles, it was the language of power, a performance that reminded everyone of their place in the grand order. Beyond the chambers, the palace thrummed with activity. Musicians played in gilded halls. Courtiers whispered in corridors, seeking favor or advancement. Painters and sculptors displayed their art, supported by royal patronage. The air carried the mingled scents of wax candles, powdered wigs, and polished wood. Even leisure was shaped by ritual. In the evenings, grand balls filled the mirrored hall with candlelight, silk gowns, and the sound of violins. Gardens hosted promenades where nobles displayed fashion and alliances. Hunting in the nearby forests provided both sport and another stage for ceremony. And yet, beneath the surface, life at Versailles was not entirely enviable. Courtiers competed fiercely for influence, their fortunes rising and falling with a gesture from the king. Debt was common, as nobles spent more than they could afford to maintain appearances. Gossip was constant, alliances fragile. In this gilded cage, the smallest misstep could mean the loss of favor. Contrast this with the life of the peasant, where one world revolved around soil, seasons, and survival, the other revolved around etiquette, symbols, and spectacle. Both were bound by duty, though in very different forms. For the peasant, the duty was to labor and endure. For the noble, the duty was to perform, to embody the grandeur of monarchy, and to uphold a system increasingly out of balance. As the 18th century wore on, the contrast grew sharper. The palace continued to sparkle, but beyond its gates, fields and villages grew restless. Hunger deepened, taxes pressed harder, and whispers of change spread. Versailles remained beautiful, but it had become a world apart, an island of ritual in a sea of discontent. And so, as we leave the gilded halls and return to the quiet of the present, we are left with the memory of this contrast: peasants bending over fields and nobles bowing in mirrored halls, both caught in the same tide of history. We have wandered together through 18th century France, drifting slowly between fields and palaces, between hunger and ceremony, between the daily struggles of peasants and the glittering rituals of Versailles. We began among the cottages, where survival depended on soil, weather, and unending labor. We then followed the life of Marie Antoinette, a queen whose fate became a symbol of both privilege and tragedy. We lingered over the strange and tangled mystery of the diamond necklace, where rumor and perception carried as much power as truth. And finally, we entered the mirrored halls of Versailles, where every gesture, every bow, every candlelit banquet was part of an elaborate theater of kingship. Through these contrasts, a picture emerges of a society stretched thin, its burdens borne heavily by those in the fields, while its wealth shimmered in palaces. The divide was not sustainable, and soon enough, the revolution would bring change. But tonight, our purpose is not to dwell on turmoil, but to notice the textures of a vanished world. The crunch of bread baked from hard grain, the rustle of silk in a candlelit ballroom, the rhythm of bells calling villagers to prayer, the soft hush of gardens at dusk. Now, as you rest, you may allow these images to fade. The peasants return to their cottages, the queen retreats to her chamber, the palace grows still as the last candle flickers out. The past drifts back into silence, leaving you here, in your own present, safe and at ease. Take a slow breath in and a long breath out. The struggles of history are behind us, their echoes distant. All that remains is calm, quiet, and rest. Good night.